Welcome to the CRE Report. I'm your host, Chris Berg. Very special guest today, Gary Wadisek. He's the CEO. Did I get that right, by the way, Gary?
Everyone calls me Wojo, Chris.
Okay, Gary Wojo, CEO and founder of RecNation. Exciting news. He's looking to raise $500 million with Goldman Sachs. Just last October, Goldman Sachs announced him as one of the premier entrepreneurs of the year. He's got a great background. He took Cincinnati Bell, acquired CyrusOne, flipped it into a REIT, and eventually in 2022, there was a $15 billion all-cash offer for CyrusOne. I'm presuming, and we'll get into this today, Gary, but that's exactly what you're looking to do as far as taking RecNation into a public REIT as well. So welcome to the show. Congratulations on all your success, and I really appreciate you being here.
Sure. Yeah. It's good to be here, Chris. Thanks a lot.
So let's just jump into, because again, these are some of my assumptions based on the research I've done on you, but hey, I learned these systems with CyrusOne. I feel like I can apply those now to RecNation. So for starters, let's talk about how do you take Cincinnati Bell, acquire CyrusOne, and flip it into a REIT?
Sure. Yeah. So look, I was the CFO of Cincinnati Bell, and I was hired to figure out what to do strategically with all the cash flow, right? It was, like a classic telco. It was generating buckets of cash, but the cash cow was dead. It just takes a while for it to keel over. And so I knew I had some time to figure out what to do with that. And, as I was looking into the different lines of business, we had a wireline business, a wireless business, a tower business, a managed service business. And as I was digging into the managed service business, I realized that there were data centers in there. And then when I just pulled apart the pieces of that business, separating the IT systems business from the underlying infrastructure, I thought there was a more interesting play in data centers. And, we just started spending more and more time understanding that, developed a strategy around it. I thought it was something that you could do on a standalone basis. And that's what we did. We separated it out. We started running it solely as an infrastructure play. And then, spoke to the board of directors about, developing a bigger strategy around it. They agreed. And we started doing just that. And then that took us down a path of acquiring CyrusOne, which was a Houston-based data center operator at the time, pretty small. And then we basically acquired that, moved it to Cincinnati, renamed our data center business CyrusOne, and then just started, expanding it, and then ultimately turned it into a REIT, IPO'd it, and then took what was a really small $500 million business and built it into a global powerhouse that was acquired by KKR for about $15 billion. So about a 30x multiple from when we first started the business. So it was a tremendous business, a lot of success, a lot of great fun, a fantastic team. And we got to do everything there. I mean, you basically kind of climbed to the top of the mountain and you did it all. And you did it along with just a tremendous, a group of individuals that, it really enjoyed working, building the company together and with one another. So it was a great run.
So it was a great run. You end up being, quasi-retired, if you will. You get an RV, all of a sudden you don't have a place to park it, thus sort of the inspiration behind RecNation. Quick question, because I know you took CyrusOne globally. Do you see RecNation as a global entity as well?
Yeah. So almost my entire career has been, international. Like, so I worked overseas, worked for General Motors. I've lived in France and lived in Belgium, and almost my entire career, I've always managed teams of people, internationally. And it was only until I went to Cincinnati Bell, that was the first domestic company I worked at, and then quickly started expanding CyrusOne globally. Because I think, look, I mean, if you're playing on a world scale, it depends on your ambitions. Like, you want to do something big, and a global stage is the way to play. I have been spending time looking at it, for that business, that opportunity here. But I mean, there's so much wood to chop in this country, because we are in the first part of the inning, right? I mean, like, we're the largest player in the space now, and we're really nothing, industry wide in this country. So before we kind of, want to expand outside, there's a lot of work to do here.
There really is. And you and I touched on this in our first conversation. And again, these are some things that I've been thinking about for this interview, but I can see RecNation, just to really give you that ARR that you're looking for, kind of become a membership type club, like a Costco kind of situation. And then with Starlink now, you could easily be a global entity where you've got these RVs and boats all over the world. They're part of the RecNation membership. I mean, is that kind of where you see this going? Hit that $7 billion number you've put out in some articles?
Yeah, no, look, I think we can easily get this to 300-400 locations nationwide. I think Starlink is just another fantastic product that Elon. That the guy is just incredible what he comes up with. But I was using that this summer, and it's good and bad, right? I mean, I was out in a remote camping location on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, which was really cool. But on the same time, I was on a bunch of board calls, to the chagrin of my wife, who was pretty annoyed that I just couldn't get away. But I think like what Starlink does for the broader community, it's going to enable people to work and take advantage of all the opportunities this country has. And you can spend your 8, 10, 12 hours a day working in that Colorado mountaintop, and then the rest of the time you can go hike around and do that. And it's available. It's actually, the speeds that I was able to get on Starlink were just impressive to me. And so I think that's just going to really kind of continue the trend of people working remotely. When I first started this business, you're right. I mean, I was literally, I have a place in Florida. We were on a beach during the middle of COVID trying to figure out what to do. And our trip to Italy kind of got skewered because of COVID. So, I convinced my wife to go buy the Airstream camper we ended up camping with. And, I still do a lot of board work. I'm on the boards of several companies now. And so a decent amount of work, but every time I knew I had a board call, I knew I had to camp and get tethered to somewhere where I had Wi-Fi access. And Starlink is a game changer. Now you can go anywhere and it's perfect. And I think more and more people are going to do that, particularly when you're in a hybrid work environment. You could just, load up the RV and go shoot to Big Bend, National Park, and go spend a couple days on a long weekend there and still get your work done. So it's pretty efficient.
Well, and you probably know the demographic numbers better than I do. And I know that RV buyers are getting younger, and yet with all the baby boomers
Yeah.
retiring, but they want to look at their portfolios, like the opportunity to have them in RVs and checking their portfolios and using Starlink and being one of your customers is, I would guess, pretty robust. I want to get into some of the nitty gritty. So here you are, you've got this Gulfstream, or excuse me, that's not a jet, but you've got your RV. maybe you have a Gulfstream too. And so you're looking for a place to park it.
It's hard to land those in the national parks.
But I do want to get into sort of the nitty gritty because you've got such a great business mind. Like you can't find a place to park yours. What happened within you looking into the numbers? You're like, because if I remember correctly, I think you guys have already raised 800 million, right?
Yeah. So that's exactly it. I mean, it's because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had such a fun time building Cyrus One and kind of doing everything you could possibly do, taking a small company, growing it and IPOing it and taking it international. So it was, you kind of basically achieved all the things I had set out to do. So I wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to do. But when we started this adventure, this camping trip, I realized that when I was bringing back my RV from Florida, moving it to Dallas, my main home, I live in Highland Park, you can't park, no Cousin Eddie's allowed, right? So you can't park the RV here, and they're pretty particular about not wanting folks to do that. So I started stressing out about where I was going to park this. And every place was sold out. And I'm like, oh my God, now what am I going to do? I got this nice toy. I can't use it. Where am I going to put it? And then to the point where I was calling up the team at Cyrus saying, hey, I got to park this at the data center because, data centers are great. There's no people there and plenty of spots and it's highly secure. So it's kind of what you're looking for. So it was really out of necessity that I kind of thought it was way too difficult to park my RV. And then once I started digging into this, I was like, wow, this is just like an untapped market. And I ultimately ended up buying the facility that I originally stored my RV at. And then I bought a couple more and just kind of bought up a half a dozen of these around Dallas. And I'm like, this is a really cool business. And it was cool because it was, from a business perspective, it was untapped, new, no one really knew much about it. But I saw it as like, it was like easy pickings, right? I mean, how do you just apply some basic business practices in terms of institutional focus on revenue management, pricing, customer service, the things that were really kind of lacking in the industry because it's basically mom and pop. But then the return profile was very much like when I first got into data centers, right? I mean, data centers, you were making a lot of money in the early days. Like you were in high cotton right out of the gate. And, and then as the industry matured and, there's a lot of capital going in, the returns kind of got attrited away, which is what you'd expect here. We're still in early stages. And so I was really attracted to this, and I'm like, hey, let me go see if there's other people that can see the same thing I do. And then when I reached out to a bunch of different private equity firms, everyone was interested in spending more time with me on this and partnering. And ultimately, I decided to partner with Centerbridge on this, which was great. It was a firm I never really knew before. They're more of a middle market type firm, about a $40 billion company, but and most of my experience in data centers were the big guys that could put data center capital, the KKRs, the Blackstones, the Carlyles of the world. But the Centerbridge team was fantastic. They had made various investments in and around this space, and so they had a lot of institutional knowledge about manufactured homes, marina, self-storage, and probably more importantly, the team that I got to work with was fantastic. Billy and Matt there, they were just, they've been great partners. And you hear all these horror stories of people working with private equity firms and it doesn't work out, that way. And I can't say anything but positive things about the experience. So it was a good one for me. So I can't complain. And so we've raised a lot of money. We built, the largest platform now in the country with almost 70 locations. And I really think I could build this to a national platform to 300-400 locations, and you could take it public, you could sell it to a strategic. There's lots of different optionalities on the exit on here, but in the meantime, it's a really fun business. Customers, like, they really enjoy what they're doing. They talk to you about their camping trips or fishing trips, and so that customer relationship aspect was something that I did not anticipate going in, because typically customers only call you in the data center when it's bad news. Like, your electricity's going down, the heat is out of control. Those aren't pleasant conversations. And so here, like, these are really pleasant conversations, unless the gate isn't working. There's a guy at your door at 4:00 in the morning trying to go get his bass boat. He can get pretty ornery, but for the most part, these are really good conversations to have with customers.
Man, I got so many questions for you. So I want to get a better idea of just sort of how your entrepreneurial mind works. So you see that there's a need, you go buy some of these. Do you know Rick Caruso by chance? Big builder out here in LA, ran for mayor of LA, and do you know that name?
Yeah, no, I saw him on the news a lot recently. I mean, he saved all his mall there. I mean, really impressive guy.
So my question for you is, I'm curious, as you were looking at this industry and then started to go get some private equity. I mean, I know you need to show them some pro formas. I'm not completely naive, but my point is, Rick Caruso had a really fascinating interview one time where he goes, I've never looked at an IRR.
Yeah.
Never cared about it, never looked at it. Like, so I want to kind of understand, as you're going into this business and exploring and starting to go, hey, wait a second, I'm going to go raise some money. Like, what were the metrics that you were looking at financially or demography, or maybe it was, TAM? What were those metrics you were looking at and going, okay, yeah, I need to go raise some money and do this?
Yeah, it's all of those. And, maybe Rick is blessed, that he has all his own money that he doesn't care, but if you're going to raise other people's money, you really have to have the metrics down, right? Well, you have to know what you're going to do, because look, I mean, you have a big sense of responsibility, probably the biggest. Like, if you take someone's money, you have to be able to deploy that and return it back to them, plus a nice return on top of it, right? Like, so there's a big responsibility when you take people's money. But the returns you're looking at are the same that you look in any investment. What is your going in kind of yields on it? What's your cash on cash returns? What's your IRRs over a certain period of time, and those are just like your base level things. But to me, I looked at a million models in my life, and maybe this is where Rick was going, is that I think more importantly than just kind of returns, because a lot of those returns and that investment stuff is really more of a spreadsheet exercise, right? You can make that IRR to be whatever you want it to be. I always looked at like what structurally do you have in the industry that's going to give you that type of confidence that you're going to be able to go do this? So you hit on one of them, right? Like an addressable market. I mean, if you have a big market that you're going after, that's always better than a small market, right? So that's generally you're in a good position. Like if it's an unbelievably fragmented space, that gives you really good, ability to kind of think you're going to do well. If so long as you have, the wherewithal to kind of go build an operating company that can sustain a competitive advantage. And so that's what I was really focused on. Like, what's my right to win, right? And so how do I think about the competitive landscape, and how I can compete against them, and how do I build a business where I can run the table and put everyone, to the sides and take a big share of that market, right? And that's the way I think about it. And that's the way we did it at Cyrus One too. I mean, when I first started Cyrus One, we were like a very small company, and there were big established players already, and there was dozens and dozens of companies. And what I did then that was somewhat novel and unique was that I was focused on supply chain. I was like, how do you design cost out? And with the goal strategically of how do I maintain the low cost position in the market and speed to market so I can ensure higher returns, minimize my capital deployment, and if I can marry that up with a sales team that just were killers, you couldn't kind of compete, right? So you marry up capital allocation with sales velocity, and that's always a good approach to take. And so I look at those industry parameters as being more my right to win, and think about, can I build a mousetrap and do something here that's uniquely different, where I can just continue to put more and more room between myself and everyone else. So like at Cyrus One, we were in the US, we were by far the years that I was there, we were by far the largest data center developer in the country, like domestically in the US. The other two bigger players, Digital Realty and Equinix, are still big companies, really big players, but they weren't developing as much. And we had a real strong competency on development because I was very comfortable with my build cost being the lowest in the market. And I had a sales team that was second to none, where we would never lose. And so I felt really good about doing that and kind of growing that business. When I think about our business here, I think about the same thing. It's like, how do you compete against the crowd that's out here? And I like my odds here because this like this is like a really, really beginning early stage investment here, and we have developed a really robust operating platform, which is very difficult to do. I mean, what I found in real estate is that real estate tends to be a passive investment play. It's kind of like like a bond math type investment. Like you get some base returns and some inflator on it, and that's kind of it. And which is a great investment. So the result is that a lot of people kind of shy away from focusing on the operating intense type businesses, right, if they can. And that's kind of where I like to focus on, because in data centers it's a very operating intense business with high capital expenditures, and if you could take that same type of mindset and apply it to this space, you could really do well. And that's what we had. So it took us about 2 years to build up a really robust operating platform here. And I was fortunate that I pulled out a lot of my execs from my Cyrus One days that kind of got some of the band back together here. There's still a band doing there, and Cyrus is doing incredibly well. They're just still killing it. They're probably like a $30 billion company now, I guess. But I got a lot of the team that are doing this here, so we're having a lot of fun, kind of recreating this. And probably the biggest lesson is, just trying to avoid some of the mistakes that we did at Cyrus. Like that grew at a 25% CAGR for the dozen or so years that I was involved with it, and that level of growth sustained is really difficult to do efficiently. And and I always recognized that my top line was really outgrowing the operating foundation that I had at the company. And so my staff meetings, a lot of tension between salespeople complaining about accountants and operations and legal, everyone complaining about everyone. And I fundamentally knew that it was because, we were outgrowing the foundation of the company. And so there were things that we needed to replace. And it's hard to do when you're a big company and you're still running hard to change out that stuff. So creating change in a mature organization is tough. So when we started this company, the team here, we went into it eyes wide open to say, okay, let's go build this correctly from the beginning in anticipation of scale so that we can run hard and avoid some of those problems. You're never going to avoid volume. You're always going to, business is just a continuing problem of solving the most important issue at that time, right? Like, so you're constantly problem solving, but if you can minimize it, at least you can, you could sleep a little better at night and avoid some of the drama.
Well, again, I don't want to ask you, but I think one of the things I really like about this asset class as well, and you and I touched on this in our first conversation as you're going out to raise this money, is every investor is looking for asymmetrical returns, right? And I think there's a powerful way to mitigate risk in this asset class, because like, hey, you know what? We acquired the wrong property, or we developed, like, okay, we'll wipe it clean, and the guy from multifamily will come in and buy it, and we'll get our money back there. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. When I think about the capital allocation here and the risk return profile, it's really attractive, right? I tell the investors, like, look, we could really screw up and just miss the boat on some of these deals, but we're never going to lose an appendage here. Like, these aren't like really, our average deals are like $6-7 million. So it's, we've never screwed up on it, but if we did, it's not going to be the end of it. If I contrast that with, if I'm doing a $500 million single asset data center development, which is what we did all the time, like, there's a very, very different risk reward, profile there. And like, you're not ever going to have an alternative use of a data center other than the data center. And this business, you called it exactly. Like, so all of our properties are in not necessarily infill locations, because that's probably not the best use for that land in downtown Dallas or Miami. But we are in areas that are in, big, HOA restricted communities where it's surrounded by master plan communities where you can easily repurpose this to, housing or other types of things there. Like, so, and we've spent a lot of time engineering our design and supply chain, similar to what we were doing at Cyrus, to get that down to a cost point that's really low and we can deliver product quickly. But at the end of the day, like, that still isn't expensive. It's not like we're building at $1,200 a foot data centers. This is, $50, $60, $70, right? So it's not really that expensive. So I've always liked this. There are a bunch of different reasons I like this asset in general, this company, what we were going to do. But one of them was just at the pure asset level is there was always a floor at which, you can repurpose these for something else. So like, we get offers all the time from people that want to go do, like, industrial builders. They approach us all the time to go want to, do this. But, the numbers that they're offering yet don't make sense. But we know over time they probably will. And, but I think also over time, as more and more people buy these toys, we're going to get continued demand. You mentioned it early on. What was interesting to me was, like, the biggest growth, in this market are younger folks. It's the millennials are the biggest buyers of RVs now, right? And which is, so it's kind of skewing down. And the other thing is the Sprinter vans. So those Class B ones are really, like, and these people are dropping over $100,000 on these, but those are ideal for exploring the country, hooking up your Starlink and just hanging out and chilling and enjoying nature. And that I think is a broad thematic trend that people are going to want to spend more and more time on experiences.
Well, especially in this younger demographic, none of them can afford homes, right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
Might as well go get a cruiser and a Starlink and go explore the country and
No,
figure out the home thing later, right?
Yeah, no. One of the heroes. This one woman who worked for me years ago at Cyrus, actually, when I started my camping trip, my wife, that was really the first time I got on Instagram. I'd never really been a social media guy, and so I started memorializing our camping trip on Instagram, and then all of a sudden, I was finding all these people like texting me like, "Hey, where are you at next, Garrett?" And it was so funny. It was all these different instant handles. It was a bunch of other CEOs of other companies or bankers or attorneys and people who didn't want to have a social media presence out there were following me. It was kind of odd. But one of the women that did was a woman that worked for me, and she's like, we're doing this, Garrett. Like my last kid is going off to college, and we bought an RV, and my husband and I are going to go cruise around the country. And so she and her husband did that for a year, and she worked for a tech company, and they were perfectly fine with it. She got her job done and did everything, but she traveled around the country doing it. And I'm like, man, I love that. Like those stories are fantastic. The other story, this is my coolest story. So we bought a couple properties from a guy out in Jacksonville. So it was a guy, older guy getting ready for retirement, which is like most of the people we buy from are older guys or husband and wife couples that have owned these things forever. So he sold this to us, and it's just a great family. Actually, all the people we bought from are just really nice folks in general. It's a nice business from that perspective. But anyway, he took his proceeds from this, and he bought a purpose-built boat that is made to do the Great Loop. So if you don't know what the Great Loop is that along the east coast of the U.S., there's the Intercoastal Waterway where you can go from Maine to Florida and don't really have to go in the ocean. You could just do an inland waterway all along. There's like this little river. So he does this, and you go up, and then he drives it. So he puts in at Jacksonville, goes along the coast up, and he stops at all these locations. Really cool. So like Annapolis, New York, all these places. But then he drives into the Hudson River, goes through the locks, gets into the Great Lakes, cruises around there, and then comes down the Mississippi River, and then it goes out to the Gulf, and then he rounds Florida and goes back. Like he does this, and I'm like, this is an awesome. Like, eventually when I retire, I want to do that trip. Like, it's an awesome trip to go do. But like, it's stories like that are pretty cool. Yeah. So we keep in touch. I follow him every year. When he puts in the boat for his next trip. So it's awesome.
Gosh, there's so many ways I want to ask you this question because I love the way your brain works. So when you hear that kind of story, does your brain go to, okay, how do we turn that into a revenue stream for RecNation?
Yeah, no, no, that's more selfishly. It's like, how do I do that for myself?
Because I keep having this like membership idea companies. That's what I want to ask you. Maybe you can share where you see the vision is. So let's say you go out and raise this 500 million. I saw an article last year. You said, hey, we're going to be $7 billion in 5 years.
Yeah.
So how do you go from where you are today to 7 billion in 5 years?
Yeah. So we have proven out the business model here. Like, we've pushed past the J curve, and this is, to your earlier point about the investors and the IRRs and everything else. But at the end of the day, you're really making a leap of faith between both partners to kind of prove that out. Because I didn't know those guys, they didn't know me, and I'm like, hey, this is what we could do, and they're like, oh, hey, let's go. And so we did it, right? So we built that operating company. It's hard to do. Like, it is really hard to go pull together all the systems, process, team. Like, we have like 75 people, right? I mean, it's hard getting all that going, and then proving out that model. So we're just done with that now. We're on the outside of that. So now we're going to start allocating capital, quicker, going faster, and running at this at scale. Because as we start developing this business, our cost of capital is just going to continue to drop and drop, and then all the efficiencies that we gain on the left side of our balance sheet in terms of the property management, asset management, that's just it's kind of like a really positive do loop, like where where our scale just begets more scale, and our cost of capital becomes, so we can kind of scale the platform. So that's what we're focused on doing, and that's how we're going to go do it. Because now we are built where we can handle 5-6 acquisitions a month and integrate them fully into our company in a month, because you have to do that quickly, because you're on your hamster wheel of, if you're going to do 5-6 acquisitions every month, you need to be able to quickly integrate that and get that up and running. So things are really start going quickly now.
Public Storage manages our stuff, and I'm sure you're familiar with Extra Space. Has got kind of their, some people call it a loan-to-own program. Their loan program, like, you're going to have a lot of cash flow in this business, right? Yeah. And so my question for you is, do you see yourself having maybe you do already have a development arm? Are you strictly going to stay acquisitions? Maybe have some bridge loans to owners and work with them, or what's the strategy?
Yes. So we do development now, but we don't do ground up. We will in the new fund, because when we started this, the team at Centerbridge is like, that's risky, and everyone sees it different. I was like, data center development was risky. This is not risky to me, but anyway, we agreed not to do it. But what we did agree to do is that we're going to allocate 15-20% of our capital doing value add improvements on our properties, and we've done a lot of that. Actually, we have about 20,000 units, and we've developed about 2,000 of those. So we've done a fair amount of development on our existing properties today. In the new fund, when we launch this, we are going to do some more ground up in here, because there are certain markets that I've been looking at for a long time, and no one wants to sell, and it's been frustrating, and I know it's great opportunities, and so we're gonna go do that. I mean, the one thing that I really learned, most of all, I think, as a REIT, right, was the whole capital allocation aspect of that is really interesting, because most of my career, I was in technology and all, and so it was a different space. So you always, like in technology, you always compete on the left side of your balance sheet. Like, how do you do things, faster, better, and that's how you make all your hay, right? How do I get a time to market advantage? All those things that you focus on technology space. Well, you don't really think too much about your capital, your balance sheet that much. But when you're a capital intensive business, as data centers are and this are, like, you spend a lot more time on your right side of your balance sheet, because then you could really get alpha also on your right side of your balance sheet as well, as you start scaling that platform. And it's really understanding how to use all those levers to your advantage that really differentiate you in a big way in any capital intensive space.
So with that being said, I'm so glad you brought this up, because have you seen what Lennar is doing, where they're now starting a land fund, and then Lennar is going to buy it from them as land as they get it developed and try to help their returns? Have you seen that?
No, I've not seen that, but I have been spending a lot of time in the challenge in the data center space. Is the capital allocation piece is really, really challenging. And so I've been spending a lot of time just kind of, riffing around how to ideally solve that problem, because there's a lot of companies that are going to going public. The challenge is, in a capital intensive business that's growing, like, how do you grow that well? I mean, to me, the company I've always admired, and I think he's done the best job, has been Hamid at Prologis. Has been, he's got so many different capital sources. Like, he's really, really come up with a fantastic mousetrap for his business, where he can take advantage of different cost of capital profiles. It just marries it up really well. But I don't know specifically what Lennar is doing. But we've reached out to Lennar. We're trying to partner with them. We're trying to partner with them because they're a big home developer, and we are fundamentally, we're providing an amenity that all of their customers need in this. So we've been trying to work with them on finding pockets of land that isn't ideal to develop on, that would be perfect for us. So we've been working with them.
I'm curious, as you are getting more and more in the business, like, we've got a pretty good site criteria about what we think is going to build out certain metrics. Mm-hmm. Are you finding certain criteria that are, acting as your most successful sites? And if so, are you focused on population? Is it income? What are the metrics you're focused on?
Yeah.
This is
we focus on population, income, the growth rates in those areas. We track the number of registered boats and RVs in those areas, and competitive supply. And then when we're looking at getting in, it's we just don't want to go in with one. The goal is, how do we get a dozen or so facilities in a market so we can best leverage all of our operating investments, right? Because we've invested a lot of time and resources on the operating model that predominantly do two things. All the things are either focused on automate as much as we possibly can, and it's focused on consolidation, where we can control as many things through one location, right? And so we run all of our facilities on a lights out basis. We leverage our operational team to cover multiple sites where they have a statement of work, an SOP that they're going out hitting multiple times a week. They have to go do certain protocols at each locations, but they don't need to be on site. If any customer has a call or question, whatever, they call us. We have a call center that we set up in the US. We augmented it with a team in South Africa to provide more support and service around the clock. But we also have an app that controls access and egress. There's a lot of things that are all focused on how do you automate that process so that you don't need to tie up a lot of headcount managing the facilities when it's not really needed.
Let's talk about some of your revenue streams. I know that you've got some ancillary opportunities here. Here's your website for people that want to go check it out. And then, you've got third-party management now you're doing. It looks like repair services, cleaning. Like, where do you see some of the most growth as far as some of these ancillary revenue streams?
Yeah, so these are all ancillary businesses that just make a lot of sense for what we're doing. So you mentioned public storage and extra space, right? So I don't know, maybe 30% of their portfolios are not owned by the corporation, right? And they're doing it. And I'm like, oh, well, we could do that. And so we started that up this year. And we've got a couple of properties that we're managing for other owners. And eventually, when the time comes for them to sell, we hope that we get the call. And if I build the company well, we should have the lowest cost of capital, that we should be the rightful buyer, right? So that's the underlying strategy there. In addition to that, so that's kind of figuring out, that's just leveraging investments you made now. How do you scale quicker? And that'll help your deal funnel. Other things on there is, like, we started off an Airbnb RV rental business, last year, where we spent a lot of time trying to get our customers to put their RVs in a rental pool that we rented out to other folks.
Wow.
So we basically, kind of like an Airbnb for RVs, we monetize their RVs for them. So, they get some money, we get some money, everyone's happy, and makes our underlying real estate that much more attractive.
Can I interrupt you there sorry, sir?
Sure.
Was it like a Turo kind of? Yeah, are you familiar with Turo? Like,
yeah. Well, actually, Turo is someone we're talking to now about wanting, having them park their cars in our facilities so people can go rent them from there.
wow.
Right. So they're, so it's kind of like, it's more akin to like an Airbnb, really. Well, I guess it's kind of both, but in our case, we do the walkthrough, right? Like, so, because you have to, so there's two things. When, we're kind of like the Hertz check-in, check-out process folks. Like, so when you come to our place, we'll rent you out that RV. We will walk it through, make sure there's no dings, ditches, everything works. How to work it, that sort of thing. And then when you come back, we just make sure it's in the same condition. And if it's not, then we charge that to the renter or to the insurance company. But we do that. And so that is a way to monetize people's investments, to make some extra cash with it.
I was going to ask, so let's talk about this revenue stream some more, because the research I did, the average RV person is using their RV, what is it, maybe 30 days out of the year? It's not a lot, right?
No, for sure. Yep.
So I've got another 11 months to generate a revenue stream thanks to you.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. And so
that is awesome.
So what's good about it is, so if you have an RV, right, and you want to turn it into a business, it's it's kind of a pain, right? You got to go market, you got
Yes.
to go talk to customers, and then then you got some sketchy dudes coming to your house, and your wife is walking them through the RV. Like, it's just so weird, right? And so we made it easy for folks. So we started that last year. We started up now where, we do a lot of work with Camping World, and like we do repair services broadly. But what we just did last week is now all Florida. We teamed up with them where they're going to do mobile repair work for all of our customers in Florida. And so that helps our customers, helps us. It's just these symbiotic things that when you look at what we're doing, I mean, there's so many different aspects of what we do that could make this much more interesting over time. And to me, it's just a question of kind of prioritization and focus, because I just can generate ideas all day, and it's just like, okay, my team makes fun of me, like, okay, Gary, let's just wave the new business idea wand and let's get it going. And so fortunately, I work with some fantastic team, and they actually do take these concepts and kind of deliver it into businesses. So I've been very, very blessed to be able to work with such great people. Actually my whole career I've just had a fantastic team that I've always worked with.
Well, one of the things I love about you're doing is all 4 of your kids are working with you now as well, right?
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. So we got them out of New York. They were all bankers, or my other son was an actuary, which wasn't a tough sell to convince to give up that gig, right? So we convinced them to join. And what it is, like, they've learned so much. So I've been blessed, to have a good career and do some cool things, but I'm even more blessed now to be able to, kind of be able to teach them how to do this. So, and it's not just them. This is like by far the youngest I'm the oldest guy in the company, which was never the case before. But what the cool part about it is that, I get as much enjoyment from being able to teach all these other folks and give them opportunities to do things that they just wouldn't be able to do, and rotate them around to different areas so they can learn a lot. And so they look back in 5 years and be like, look, you will never get the opportunity to do what you're doing here ever in a career. And ultimately, more than anything, I'm teaching them how to fish, right? Like, where they can all go out. My goal would be, if I was successful as a dad, right? Is one, empathetic, right? If they're empathetic for others, then I know I made it as a dad, right? But at a professional level, if they can all go out and start their own businesses and have the confidence and skill and experience to do that, then I really, really succeeded, I think.
Completely agree. Gary, I hope you can tell I could talk to you for days. I want to be respectful of your time. Anything else you want to add or share that I haven't asked you?
No, this was good. Good catching up with you.
That was great. And again, let's just share with people if they want to find out more about you. Maybe there's people that want to be part of the $500 million raise. How can they reach out and be in communication with you?
Yeah. Just give us a call, or email me at wojo@recreationstorage.com, and I'm always around.
Man, Gary, thank you so much. Wish you continued success. And check them out, recreationstorage.com, recreationstorage.com. This is the CRE Report. Fantastic conversation. Please share this with family, friends, and colleagues. And we'll see you again soon.
Great.